Hi, in this video I'm going to be telling you why I've stopped shooting in RAW so much. Join me, roll credits. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy with you once again, and I'm still at the Solway Aviation Museum. If you didn't see my previous video where I was testing out my DJI Osmo OM5, there's a link straight above. Have a quick look at that. But while I'm here, I decided I was going to bring you a little bit of an update as to why I've changed my viewing habits somewhat on things such as shooting in RAW. Now, there's a bit of a history goes to this one. When I first got into using cameras for digital photography, it was about 2014. I'd shot on analog film for decades, and it took me quite a while to get into digital. Now, in those days, you were just starting to get the better resolutions and the better facilities on the cameras. We really have come a long way since the 2013-14 on the camera technology. But at the time, you had an awful lot of people like the Jared Polands of the world who were advising, shoot RAW, I shoot RAW, which is fine. And I've got a lot of respect for that. And I shot RAW for a long time. But I used to shoot RAW for a particular reason. When I was shooting videos for commercial purposes, I needed to make sure that I had a safety net. If I made a mistake in somewhere, if there was something didn't quite work out, I needed the latitude of having a RAW shot which would enable me to get the shot, because as a professional, the important thing is getting the shot for the client and making it a really usable and really good shot. Now, I was doing a lot of high volume photography work for a good while, schools and colleges and cadet organisations, for instance. And there I wanted consistency. I'd be using studio strobes, or I'd be using simple flashlights. But basically on those, even the best strobes will change their characteristics as they warm up and as they're used throughout the day. Now, I could be shooting anything between 200 shots and 2,000 shots a day when I was doing some of these high volume shoots. And for me, consistency was the important thing. By shooting in RAW meant that if you did get a slight change in color temperature or a slight change in exposure, you could easily correct it. But of course, it did do the other thing as well, which rarely happened, but unfortunately it did once or twice, where you accidentally hit a control. Now, when you're doing portrait shoots indoors, I tend to set it up so that I'm selecting the aperture that I want, and I'll set the speed to the highest flash sync I can possibly get, and then I'll adjust the power of the strobes to make sure that I've got the right exposure. So of course, if you accidentally knock one of the controls, such as exposure compensation, or you change your aperture slightly, that will knock your exposure out for a while. And when you've got kids coming through, you could be doing a child every 30 seconds to do a really good portrait shoot. Sometimes you were so intent on trying to make sure the subject was right that you could actually catch a control and not realize you'd done it. It made a big difference when you could actually isolate controls and lock them down in cameras. But in the early days, they weren't available for most, even on professional cameras. So I did have a few situations where I'd shoot a few hundred photographs, and then all of a sudden I'd find myself to be a third of a stop, 2/3 of a stop, maybe a full stop out exposure-wise, because I've caught a control. And I needed to be able to get those back in and have the same consistency for the first shot as for the last one insofar as the output. And that's where RAW really came in, because it gave you the latitude to be able to get back from some of those problems. Now, I've stopped shooting like that. I don't do those shots. I'm very rarely doing shots for clients. So the idea of actually doing a shot and needing to worry about it to get consistency for a client has pretty much gone. And the other thing is as well, when I used to shoot film, you didn't have the safety net of that. Yes, you could get a lot out in post-production insofar as in the darkroom you could change exposure and contrast and your colour balance, but it wasn't quite as easy as it is to do now. So now I'm basically shooting for myself. I'm quite happy with the results I'm getting for myself, and I've gone back to some of the older ways of taking a little bit more time and a little bit more effort to make sure that I get a really good shot in the can first time every time. But of course, even doing that, you still need to have that latitude to be able to pull information out for if you're doing really good prints. But the majority of my photographs now are going on social media, and the majority of my photographs are actually being done at a different size to what I normally shoot. a lot of my photos are going straight onto YouTube videos to accompany the videos that I'm doing at the moment. So I'm actually having to crop down to 16:9 to get them to fit. So I'm not shooting in the normal 4:3 or 3:2 format. I'm shooting in 16:9. I also think that an awful lot of the effects that you're getting on the cameras are really, really good. So by shooting in JPEG and RAW, I've been having the best of both worlds. But of course, the thing is, when you're shooting in RAW, they're about 10 times the size of a normal JPEG file. So you've got storage considerations on that, and also write speed considerations. So if you're doing anything where you're doing a high frame rate capture, I've been doing some 20 frame a second shoots recently, and you suddenly find that you're filling the buffer up with RAW. So if you can go on to JPEG, you're almost impossible to fill the buffer up these days, because the write speeds on the modern cards, especially the UHS 2 cards and the newer cards and that, are fantastic insofar as write speed. So in reality, by shooting JPEG, it means I'm not going to have any of those problems. It does mean that if you do muck it up, as I say, I'm shooting in 16:9, you can't suddenly expand it up to the higher one if you don't have the RAW, because you have it saved as a 16:9 shot. But again, this comes into taking the shot you want to in the first place. So a lot of the time I'll be just taking the right shot in the right circumstance. And also, if I want to use some of the artifacts, then they're really useful, because one of the things I really detest doing, I hate editing. I do really hate editing on the computer. Sitting on a computer for hours trying to edit a shot together just really doesn't seem like fun to me. So one of the things that I try to avoid is actually having to do too much post editing. And by allowing the camera to do a lot of that editing at the point of source really makes things easier. Now, if you've actually shot anything on RAW in the past, if you're not familiar with how that works, you'll probably have been very, very disappointed. The colours look flat, there's not a great deal of obvious contrast on them, they don't look particularly good. But being RAW does allow you to pull all those colours out, pull that contrast out, and really make something of it. JPEGs are a lossy format, so the camera will do that for you, but anything it doesn't need, it will get rid of. So what's the point of this? Well, the point that I'm making on this one is that my style of taking photographs has changed, and changed noticeably. So the days where I needed to shoot RAW have gone. I shoot now because I'm doing something for me and for my social media, to go on Facebook, to go on Instagram, to go on YouTube, and very, very rarely to be printed out. If I'm going to do some prints, I will put it back to RAW. But the majority of my shots I'm now taking on JPEG only, on JPEG fine, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So what about you? Do you shoot RAW all the time? Do you shoot JPEG? Which do you prefer? Is a JPEG output perfectly adequate for what you need, or do you need that RAW output so that you can manipulate it really well afterwards? Let me know in the comments below. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a big thumbs up. That gets YouTube's algorithms to spread it far and wide to more and more people. And don't forget to hit the subscribe box below if you want to get to subscribe to the channel. It costs nothing, doesn't cost you a penny, and it really helps the channel on this one. And if you do want to help the channel to sustain us, there's a PayPal link below which you can give a donation for a cup of coffee. However, till the next time, this is Brian James, a Micro Four Thirds guy, signing off and saying bye-bye. Keep on enjoying your photography, whether you shoot in JPEG or RAW. Keep on having fun with your photographs. Bye-bye.